On one quiet night, Jenny Jones vanished on her way to St. Aurelius Medical Center while going for her night shift. She had heard suspicious steps following her that night, and she had immediately shared her location with her close friend Myra in case things went wrong before things went wrong. The search for Nurse Jenny began almost immediately, leaving her friend, nurses and doctors in St. Aurelius Medical Center with nothing but worries. Then came the early morning of the second day, after Myra had shared the location details her missing friend had sent to her with the police. The location directed them towards a field not too far from the hospital. After fire had cleared the field, and when the smoke settled, a metal hatch was discovered beneath, revealing Jenny was in the hole beneath the metal hatch, turning the case to a desperate hunt for an innocent black nurse. Jenny Jones walked into St. Aurelius Medical Center with a quiet confidence that couldn't be taught. She didn't announce herself. She didn't compete. She simply worked, calm hands, sharp instincts, and a kindness that felt effortless. Though she was still on clinical placement, doctors began calling her name first during emergencies. Patients asked for her by description, not title, the young nurse with the gentle voice. Supervisors noticed too. When critical decisions had to be made, they watched how Jenny moved before speaking. She anticipated needs, caught mistakes early, and handled pressure with an ease that embarrassed people who had been there for years. Soon, her opinions carried weight, sometimes more than full-time staff. That was when the air changed. Claire Whitman and Rebecca Doyle had earned their positions the hard way, or so they believed. They were supposed to be respected, established, untouchable. Instead, a black trainee was quietly becoming the standard everyone admired. At first, the hostility was subtle. Conversations stopped when Jenny entered a room. Break rooms fell silent. Then came the whispers. Comments muttered just loud enough to sting, mocking remarks about her background, questions laced with poison. Does she even belong here? Hallway laughter followed her steps, smiles that disappeared the moment she turned away. Jenny noticed. She always did, but she lowered her head and kept working, refusing to give them the satisfaction of reaction. Excellence became her shield, kindness her quiet rebellion. Still, resentment grew heavier by the day. Every praise Jenny received felt like an insult to them. Every grateful patient widened the gap. And deep inside Claire and Rebecca, a dangerous question took root, one that would change everything. Why does a trainee shine brighter than us? The hostility didn't announce itself. It crept in quietly, learned Jenny's schedule, and waited for moments with no witnesses. The comments became sharper, wrapped in false concern. "You're very confident for someone still learning," Claire would say, her smile tight. Rebecca preferred questions that felt like traps. Did they teach you that where you're from? Always delivered when no supervisor was close enough to hear. Nothing was ever direct enough to report. Nothing ever left proof behind. Jenny found herself working alone more often than before, but she swallowed it all. Each night she returned to the small apartment she shared with Myra, carrying the weight of a job that was slowly draining her spirit. Myra listened, always. She let Jenny speak without interruption, without doubt, without judgment. When Jenny's voice cracked, Myra held her hands and reminded her why she started. 6 months, Myra would say softly. Just 6 months, then you're free, don't let them ruin your future. Jenny wanted to believe that endurance was strength. Reporting the behavior felt risky. She was only a trainee. One wrong move, one misunderstood complaint, and her record could follow her forever. She'd seen it happen before, trainees labeled difficult, quietly pushed out. So she chose silence. At work she smiled. She worked harder. She became flawless. At home she exhaled the pain she refused to show the world. She told herself this was temporary, that excellence would protect her, that if she kept her head down the storm would pass. What Jenny didn't know was that silence doesn't always calm hatred. Sometimes it gives it room to grow. The night Jenny disappeared began like every other shift, quiet, routine, almost forgettable. She tied her hair back, slipped into her jacket and checked the time. Night duty again. She told herself it was just another walk, just another shift, just another step closer to being done. Halfway down the street, the air changed. She heard it, footsteps that didn't belong to her, too slow when she slowed, too steady when she quickened her pace. Jenny stopped and turned around. The road behind her was empty. No cars, no faces, only the hum of distant traffic and her own breath. She walked on. The feeling returned almost immediately. The same measured steps just out of sight. Jenny glanced into shop windows, checked alleyways, scanned reflections, nothing. Her heart began to race, not from fear yet, but from instinct. She called Myra. Her voice stayed calm, but her words didn't. Myra listened, alert now, telling her to walk faster, stay on the main road, keep talking. Jenny shared her live location without hesitation. "I'm almost there," she said, though she wasn't sure anymore. The footsteps grew closer. Jenny turned again, still nothing. Then suddenly hands came from behind, strong, fast. Her phone hit the ground. Her scream never made it past her throat. A cloth pressed over her face. Darkness closed in as her wrists were bound tight, cutting into her skin. She fought, she kicked. She tried to reach her phone to hear Myra's voice again, but it was gone. The world narrowed to pain, pressure, and the sound of her own breathing growing wild with panic. Minutes passed, maybe longer. Myra kept calling, the location stayed frozen. Jenny didn't answer. By the time the street returned to silence, the night shift at St. Aurelius Medical Center had already begun. Jenny Jones never clocked in. Myra didn't sleep. Every unanswered call, every frozen location replayed in her mind until fear hardened into certainty. As soon as the sky began to lighten, she left the apartment and headed straight for St. Aurelius Medical Center, clinging to the hope that maybe, somehow, Jenny had made it there and her phone had failed her. She hadn't. At the front desk, Myra said Jenny's name too quickly, too urgently. The clerk checked the log, then checked it again. Her expression shifted. A supervisor was called. Whispers passed between staff members. Jenny Jones didn't report for her night shift, someone finally said. The words landed like a blow. Around them, nurses avoided eye contact. A few exchanged glances that lingered a second too long. It wasn't shock Myra saw on their faces. It was discomfort. The kind that comes when people know something is wrong but are afraid to say it out loud. Myra insisted Jenny would never miss work without notice. She explained the calls, the shared location, the silence that followed. The mood changed instantly. What had been concern turned into alarm. Security was alerted. Management stepped in. Within minutes, the police were contacted. Officers arrived and began asking questions. When Jenny was last seen, who she worked with, whether she'd mentioned any threats. The hospital corridors, once busy and indifferent, felt tight and watchful. Conversations stopped when officers passed. Every corner suddenly mattered. What had been Jenny's workplace, where she'd endured whispers and quiet cruelty, was now something else entirely. A place of last contact, a place under scrutiny, a place where anyone could be hiding the truth. The moment Myra handed over Jenny's location data, the search moved from fear to urgency. Officers studied the coordinates in silence, then looked up at one another. The signal hadn't gone cold. It hadn't drifted. It hadn't moved an inch since the night before. They followed it. Less than 15 minutes from St. Aurelius Medical Center, patrol vehicles slowed near a stretch of overgrown bushland wedged between an access road and an abandoned footpath. The closeness felt wrong, too convenient, too bold. This was not some distant hiding place. Whoever took Jenny hadn't gone far at all. Search teams spread out immediately, boots pressed into damp soil, Branches snapped. Every inch of the bush was combed slowly, methodically. They looked for footprints, torn fabric, a dropped phone, anything. They found nothing. Still, the GPS kept pulsing, strong, certain, unyielding. Every device confirmed the same thing: Jenny was here. Confusion crept in. Officers stood where the signal peaked, turning in circles, staring at the ground beneath their feet. There was nowhere left to search, at least nowhere visible. The bush was thick, layered, deceptive. It swallowed sound. It swallowed light. Then someone said it. What if she wasn't on the surface? The suggestion hung in the air, heavy and unsettling. To see beneath the brush, they would have to clear it completely, cut it down, or burn it away. The decision wasn't easy, but time was no longer a luxury. They chose fire, controlled, careful, deliberate. Flames crept forward, eating through dry leaves and tangled roots. Smoke curled upward, carrying the sharp scent of urgency. As the fire thinned the ground cover, the earth beneath began to change shape. A dark opening appeared where solid ground should have been. Silence fell. The GPS still pulsed, stronger now. Whatever had taken Jenny hadn't just hidden her. It had buried her. As the last flames died down, the ground revealed what careful searching never could. Beneath the burned brush was a metal hatch leading to an underground tunnel. An underground tunnel, carved deep enough to swallow a human body and every sound it made. Rescue teams didn't hesitate. They descended quickly, flashlights slicing through the darkness. The air below was thick, stale, suffocating. Then someone shouted her name. Jenny was there. Her wrists were bound tightly, skin raw where rope had cut in. Her body lay motionless against the cold earth, chest barely rising, if at all. She had been trapped in that cave the entire night, breathing recycled air, waiting for help that didn't come. And when the fire burned above, the heat and smoke had stolen what little strength she had left. For a moment, it looked like they were too late. Then a rescuer pressed 2 fingers to her neck. A pause, another second. She's got a pulse. Chaos followed. Jenny was lifted, carried out of the earth that nearly became her grave, rushed straight back to St. Aurelius Medical Center, the same hospital that had failed to protect her. Doctors worked frantically. Oxygen, IV lines, shouted instructions. Her body fought as hard as it could, but when stability finally came, consciousness did not. Jenny slipped into a coma, suspended between survival and silence. In the hallway, Myra stood shaking, watching glass doors swing open and shut. That was when she saw them. Claire Whitman, Rebecca Doyle. They stood together, faces blank, eyes fixed on the emergency room. No shock, no tears, no relief, just stillness, cold and unreadable. Inside, doctors refused to give up. They monitored every breath, every heartbeat, pushing back against the damage done by cruelty and time. Machines hummed where Jenny's voice should have been. She was alive. But the cost of that night was far from over. While Jenny lay in a coma, the investigation began in earnest. Officers questioned staff, reviewed schedules, retraced movements. Myra didn't hold anything back. She told them about the hostility Jenny endured, the isolation, the racism that thrived when no one was watching. She said the names out loud: Claire, Rebecca, and she said them with certainty. At first, suspicion was only that, suspicion, until a senior nurse stepped forward. She spoke carefully but firmly. On the night Jenny disappeared, Claire had been receiving repeated phone calls during her shift. Not emergencies, not hospital-related. Long calls taken in corners ended abruptly whenever someone approached. At the time, it felt odd. Now it felt deliberate. Claire and Rebecca were brought in for questioning. Separated, confronted with evidence, pressed by investigators who already knew the truth, their stories began to crack. Hours passed. Silence turned into panic. Panic turned into confession. They admitted it. They had hired men to abduct Jenny, not to scare her, not to warn her, but to silence her permanently. Her excellence made them feel exposed. Her favor made them feel replaceable. And instead of facing their own inadequacy, they chose cruelty. By the time Jenny took her next breath in the ICU, the people responsible for nearly ending her life were in custody. It wasn't just a crime anymore. It was jealousy, racism, and hatred, finally dragged into the light. The trial had begun, but Jenny had not. For days, her body lay still beneath white sheets and blinking monitors, caught between the past that tried to kill her and a future that waited patiently. Doctors spoke in cautious tones. Myra sat beside her bed, counting breaths, whispering prayers into the quiet spaces the machines could not fill. Then one morning, Jenny moved. At first it was barely noticeable, a twitch of her fingers, a slow tightening of her brow. Myra leaned forward, afraid to breathe. When Jenny's eyes finally opened, confusion flooded them before fear could catch up. The room felt unfamiliar, too bright, too silent. She tried to speak, but no sound came. The memories returned in fragments. The walk, the feeling of being watched, hands from behind, darkness, rope biting into her wrists. She remembered the terror, but not the faces. Whoever took her had made sure of that. They were shadows without names. When doctors explained what had happened, how close she came to dying, Jenny closed her eyes. Not in anger, not in disbelief, in gratitude. She cried quietly that night, not because she was broken, but because she was still here, because she survived something meant to erase her. For the first time since her placement began, she allowed herself to feel relief without guilt. "I'm alive," she whispered to Myra. "That's enough." She didn't speak of revenge. She didn't ask about the hospital. She didn't mention the nurses on trial. Instead, she bowed her head and thanked God, not the system that ignored her pain, not the workplace that failed to protect her, not the people who came too late, but God alone. Jenny forgave herself for surviving when others wanted her gone, for breathing when hatred tried to suffocate her, for choosing life over bitterness. She had been buried underground, left to disappear. Yet here she was, awake, breathing, and refusing to die. And that, more than any verdict, was her first victory. The courtroom was silent in a way that felt deliberate, as if every breath was being weighed. By the time the trial unfolded, the story had already spread, about the trainee who nearly vanished beneath the ground, about jealousy that crossed into cruelty. But inside those walls there was no room for rumor, only facts, only consequences. Prosecutors laid everything bare. The confession that followed, pressure and evidence too strong to deny. Each detail stitched together a truth that could no longer be dismissed. Claire Whitman and Rebecca Doyle sat stiffly as the charges were read. Their families watched from behind, faces strained with disbelief and shame, caught between love and the weight of what had been done. Jenny did not testify. She didn't need to. Her survival was evidence enough. When the judge finally spoke, the words were firm and irreversible. Guilty. 12 years imprisonment for conspiracy to commit kidnapping, resulting in attempted manslaughter. A gasp rippled through the room. One family broke down quietly. Another stared straight ahead, hollowed by the sound of a future collapsing. Claire's shoulders slumped. Rebecca wept openly. The courtroom absorbed it all without mercy. Jenny listened from a distance, not present but not untouched. When Myra told her the verdict, there was no smile, no relief that burst into celebration, just a slow exhale. Justice didn't feel light. It didn't feel victorious. It felt heavy. Heavy with everything that had been lost. Heavy with the knowledge that punishment could never fully restore what was taken. But it was real. It was spoken aloud. It was written into record. And for the first time since that night, Jenny felt something settle. Not peace, but closure. Jenny returned to St. Aurelius Medical Center one last time, not as a victim, not as a headline, but as a trainee determined to finish what she started. She completed her placement quietly. She did her work with the same precision and grace she always had, but something in her had shifted. The halls no longer felt like a place of purpose. They felt like echoes. When the final evaluation was signed, her supervisors expected gratitude, maybe even excitement. Instead, Jenny thanked them politely and walked away. She made her decision without drama. She would not practice nursing again. To Myra, it didn't make sense at first. Nursing had been Jenny's dream, the thing she endured everything for. Myra tried to reason with her, reminded her of the lives she touched, the good she did, the future she earned. Jenny listened, then shook her head gently. "I survived," she said. "I don't owe anyone more than that." She chose a different life, one that didn't require night walks or hostile corridors. She found remote work quiet, steady, unseen. A life where excellence didn't provoke resentment, where safety wasn't something she had to fight for. Her days became slower. Her nights peaceful, no alarms, no whispers, no fear. Jenny stopped chasing validation from systems that failed her. She stopped proving herself to people who never deserved access to her spirit. Peace became her measure of success. Myra stayed by her side, even when she didn't fully understand. Support didn't require agreement, only loyalty. Jenny didn't walk away broken. She walked away alive. And in choosing safety over applause, quiet over recognition, and peace over prestige, she reclaimed the one thing no verdict could ever give her back on its own: control over her life. If you really enjoyed this video, like and comment your opinions below in the comment section, and also subscribe to this channel to enjoy more crime-related content every day.